W. Farnsworth here. This week, kneecap aficionado Dan Campbell, Jared Goff, and the dastardly Detroit Lions head to U.S. Bank Stadium to face our juggernaut, first-place Minnesota Vikings. Will they walk out king of the jungle or the Motor City Kitties? We'll find out. All right, thanks, Robert. There we go. Titanic struggle this week.
Oh, before we get started on the board,
yeah,
I did call Dan Campbell. I finally got through to him, and I mentioned to him, this might be a really good week to get Hendon Hooker some experience at quarterback. I mean, that could be very valuable down the road.
I called Campbell and I ordered the Applebee's sampler platter. I actually like those commercials. He actually does a really good job of those commercials.
And then he brought you a quesadilla.
Yeah. Give me a goddamn quesadilla. As always, we do our preview as a tribute to the old CBS NFL Today pregame show. It was Brent Musburger and Jimmy the Greek Snyder did it, but it had Phyllis George, Irv Cross. Later, it had Jane Kennedy.
Yes, it did.
I was on a big Phyllis George. All right. Anyways, category is a little bit different, but the philosophy is still the same. We'll start with quarterback. We'll finish with intangibles. Because what are intangibles, Chris?
They are things that are not tangible, that you really can't see.
Just things you can't see.
There are things you can't see, son. Just shut up and enjoy the show. All right. We're going to start with quarterback. And, Drew, why don't you kick us off with quarterback this week? Sam Darnold versus Jared Goff.
Did you guys have as much trouble with this as I did? I mean, this was a tough one.
No.
Very simple. This is pretty easy for me.
I think Jared Goff's probably a more talented quarterback than Sam Darnold, but it's about this game. And this game, I'm playing a little bit of karma into it, and people can send me hate mail, you Lions fans, but I've been picking KOC every week. I'm not gonna not pick him if we keep winning. Let me just put it like that.
Okay.
Just like this whistle, undefeated with the choo-choo, man.
Blow it. There we go. Okay.
With Boxcar Willie. So I'm going to take Sam Darnold. But overall, if you asked me if I had to take somebody in my draft, I'd probably take Goff over him, but not for this game.
Okay.
This is a big game. This is a big game, and Darnold's going to get it done.
Drew picked slinging Sammy Dots. Okay.
Yes.
As much as I would love to pick Sam Darnold, I normally would have, but man, Goff has been playing lights out. And the Vikings defense is very good. Vikings defense has been playing very well. I think with the full defense, Brian Flores could very well have Goff's number, but I'm going to pick Goff. I just think he's a little bit better quarterback. And if there's a quarterback in this division or in this conference that could handle a Brian Flores defense, it might be Jared Goff, because he's got a little bit more experience than Brock Purdy. And Brock Purdy threw for a lot of yards on that. 49ers were behind pretty much the whole game. I don't know that will be the case on Sunday. I think it's going to be a close game. I want to go with Sam. I want to pick Sam, but I'm going to go with Goff. Chris, what about you?
All right, so I'm going to get to be the one that disagrees with both of you this time, because I am taking Sam Darnold in this one, because Jared Goff is not a better quarterback than Sam Darnold is right now. He's not. I mean, okay. Darnold has the targets to throw to, particularly if Hawkinson comes back. He looked a little bit off kilter in that game in London. I don't know if it was because he was dealing with some being shaken up a little bit after taking that shot to the ribs, or if they were just trying to test people deep. But the Lions secondary is nowhere near on the level of the Jets secondary, and I think there's going to be a lot of guys running open, particularly. Like Drew said before, the Lions defense is predicated on getting a lot of pressure, and if Aiden Hutchinson's not there, that pressure's not happening. So I think I'm giving it to Slinging Sammy. Got to go with the guy. Got to go with the man.
It.
All right.
I like it.
Okay. Running game. I'll kick this one off. Look, I like Aaron Jones. I think he's been a dramatic improvement to the Vikings running game. Even if he plays, if it's a hamstring, not the hip now, how much will he play? Will he re-aggravate that? If he does get hurt, now you're looking at Ty Chandler and Cam Akers. Even if Aaron Jones was fully healthy, I still think the combination of David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs is a better combo than Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. And when you add in the Aaron Jones injury and the questions surrounding that, I've got to go with the Lions here.
Yeah, this is a pretty easy one for Detroit. I mean, Like Ted said, if Aaron Jones is 100% healthy, it'd be a little closer, but Aaron Jones isn't healthy, and Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery are both really, really good. They are the key to Detroit's offense, I think. If the Vikings can somehow slow those guys down, it's going to be a lot easier for them. But yeah, just the way the personnel lines up right now, the Lions are pretty easy check mark for this one, I think.
Drew?
Yeah, I'm in agreement with both you guys. This is basically the key to the game for me.
Yep.
I think it's the best running back tandem in football. I don't know if you could name me two more guys that are better than those two, name them, but I got them as number one in the league. They complement each other well. They both catch the ball out of the backfield, run over people. I mean, they play within that system perfectly. They know their role. Each of them does. It's a good thing that they got going on for themselves right now. Running game for Detroit, fourth in the league. Week 1, 163. Week 2, 139. Week 3, 187. Week 4, 116. Last week against the Cowgirls, 184 yards, a grand total of 789 yards and 9 touchdowns. This is the number one key to the whole game. If the Vikings can find a way to control this, they're going to win the game.
And the Vikings are second in the NFL as a team in stopping the run.
The Lions' offensive line, they're all downhill. They want to play downhill and smash. You watch that Dallas game, that looked like a pro team against a college team, Chris. They
Sure did.
They were mashing the Cowboys. Didn't even look like a regular defense. They were mashing them into the ground, and oh my God. I mean, the Vikings are second in the football though in rush defense. So
Yep.
we're not the Cowboys. Vikings are going to have to do a lot of swarming. They're going to have to cut off the perimeter. They're going to have to cut off the A and B gaps. They're going to have to cut everything off to stop that rush game. Because if they get that going, Ted, you mentioned Goff. That's when he starts hitting Williams and the St. Brown. And the Vikings cannot let them be in 2nd and 1 all day. They can't.
No, they can't. Nope.
That's the number one key to the whole game. But I give my check mark to the Lions on the running game. Just too strong.
Chris, who do you like in the receiving game?
All right, so this is where I'm going to throw my my little tasty tidbit in there.
It's called
Justin
a dinky.
Jesus Christ, you're having a stroke. So Justin Jefferson, we're familiar with that guy. He's played 8 games in his career against the Detroit Lions. In those 8 games, he averages 8 catches for 134 yards. This guy absolutely owns the Detroit Lions. And think about these numbers. That includes the one game where he had the lowest yardage total of his career. So he had one game against Detroit in 2022 where he had 3 catches for 14 yards. So even if you include that game, he's averaging 8 catches for 134 yards every time he plays Detroit. Justin Jefferson owns this defense, and he owns this defense until this defense shows that he does not anymore. So that they're going to be preoccupied with Jefferson. Jefferson's still going to get his, whether they're preoccupied with him or not. Jordan Addison is going to see single coverage all day. If Hawkinson comes back, the middle of the field's going to be open. So I know Amon-Ra St. Brown is great, and Sam Laporta is a really good tight end, but this one goes with the Vikings because the rule I've kind of defaulted to a couple times this year. When in doubt, go with the team that has Justin Jefferson on their side, and that's Minnesota. So there you go.
Drew?
I had a tough way to go on this. Since we all agreed before the show we can't do any push, can't do the push because it's kind of an easy way out. I had a push going in this category. Guys, as much as I hate to do it, you look at the 4th best passing team in football, the Lions, their offensive line, against the 30th ranked pass defense team. Both teams have exceptional weapons. I had to give the check mark to the Lions, just barely on the receivers. But let me tell you, this category, it included your tasty tidbit, Chris. This category includes my X factor to the whole game. I have one X factor for the whole game. Jordan Addison. He's my player of the game. Jordan Addison, I see him having an exceptional day. They're sick of Justin Jefferson kicking their asses. They're going to roll coverage all day. I think Jordan Addison will have 100 yards by halftime.
Wow.
Receiving. I think he's my X factor for the week.
I'm going to give the Vikings a check mark here. Amon-Ra St. Brown has 31 catches, but he only has 289 yards. Well, I mean, he's like way below his career average in yards per catch. Jamison Williams is really starting to emerge as like a big play guy for them,
Yes.
and don't think Brian Flores hasn't noticed that. Sam Laporta is still a premier tight end. I normally would have given them the edge because of Sam Laporta, but I think the Vikings' top three wide receivers are more well-rounded in terms of Jefferson, Addison, and Jordan Naylor. I just have this hunch that Hawkins is going to be back because he wants to take it out on Detroit. I just think he does.
Are you guys giving a check mark to the Viking receivers as if Hawkinson's going to play, or are you still
No,
giving it?
even if he doesn't play, I still like the Vikings offensive receivers because the Lions secondary isn't as good as the Vikings secondary, and they're banged up. I mean, Brian Branch is banged up, and so is the one cornerback, Carlton Davis.
He got cleared today. He'll play.
Yeah, well, he didn't practice. He hasn't practiced, and he was questionable last week. He didn't practice on Wednesday, so I still think they're banged up, and that's going to be a pretty big advantage for the Vikings. So that's why I gave my check mark to the Vikings.
Yeah, sometimes it's not good to be banged up.
Well,
Depends on. Yeah.
come see, come saw. All right, Drew, talk about the O-line. This was the toughest one for me.
Was it?
Yeah.
The Lions have the best offensive line in football. How else do you want me to say it?
All right.
We can go guy to guy right down the line, but, Ragnow, Decker,
Sewell.
not even mentioning Sewell. I mean, they got the best offensive line in football. That's part of why the Lions have transitioned from skid marks to what they are today, is the offensive line. Can you build a team from the inside out? I like the Vikings offensive line, but to a man, they don't stand up to what the Lions bring. Now, I did check. The crowd is going to be a factor. Vikings, one of the loudest stadiums in the league. I checked on false starts. The Lions have 6 false starts on the season, 4 on the road. Not very many, pretty disciplined up there in the false start end. Lions get my check mark for the offensive line. They got a great offensive line.
Yeah, I was kind of comparing player by player. I think I got Darisaw over Decker. Brandel and Glasgow are fairly much a push so far this year. Ragnow is head and shoulders above Bradbury. Zeitler's head and shoulders above Ingram. As much as I like Brian O'Neill, he's not as good as Penei Sewell. I give it to the Lions. I mean, that is a unit, man. That offensive line is a freaking unit. So
Yeah, I can't disagree with you two on that one. I mean, the Vikings offensive line has been good. They've gotten a lot of their problems ironed out, but yeah, just all 5 guys across the board for Detroit. We talked about how the Vikings still have issues on the interior. The Lions don't have issues on the interior, and they don't have issues at tackle. So the check mark to this one is a pretty easy one for Detroit, I think.
all right, front 7. I'll kick this one off. Aiden Hutchinson injury completely moves this to the Vikings' favor. I talked about pressures when we were talking about the Hutchinson injury. Pressures are 118 to 114 in favor of Detroit. 38% of those, or 45, I think the number was, were produced by Aiden Hutchinson. You can't replace that. You go down and compare their defensive line, probably was better than the Vikings, but now you take Aiden Hutchinson out of that. That's a wash now. Their linebacking core with Campbell, Anzalone, and Malcolm Rodriguez is pretty good, but I don't think it's as good as Grenard.
Pace.
Ivan Pace, Blake Cashman. Well, Cashman's not going to play, but Kamir Gabaja Bila, not good.
Camus Grugier-Hill.
Yeah, Grugier-Hill has played very well, and it just goes again back to the Vikings' depth. That's your one guy goes down, another guy comes in and plays very well. Onwuzurike for Detroit has played very well. He's not listed as a starter on the depth chart, but he's a very solid rotational guy. But I like the Vikings front 7 in this matchup, especially with the Hutchinson injury.
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, without the Hutchinson injury, this might go to Detroit just because he's, the best player at his position in football. But, you pointed out how much of the pressure Detroit has generated has come from Aiden Hutchinson. The Vikings aren't relying on just one guy to get all that pressure. I know Grenard's had a ton of pressures in the first 5 games. I think he's leading the Vikings in pressures. I think he's at like 25 or 30, somewhere in that area. But they're coming from everywhere. It's coming from Pace and Andrew Van Ginkel, and Harrison Phillips is even getting in the backfield. I mean, that dude might be having the best season of his career right now. So, like you said, the Hutchinson injury completely swings this to Minnesota, even if Blake Cashman isn't out there on Sunday, and it doesn't sound like he's going to be. But yeah, advantage Vikings.
Drew?
Slight edge to the Vikings. Once I break down and factor in the injuries, the Hutchinson thing's huge. He has half of their sacks.
Yeah.
I mean, they got 15 sacks. He has 7.5. The next closest to him is Aleem McNeil at 2.5. Aleem McNeil might now be the best lineman that they got. That guy's a really good player.
He just signed a big old new contract too. So
Yep. Just had a big extension. Yep.
I don't know. He's gonna, as far as I see, he's gonna knock Bradbury on his ass. But in terms of, I think the Vikings have a better defensive line, but I'm gonna disagree on the linebackers. Asloney, Rodriguez, and Jack Campbell. Without Cashman, they got a better set of linebackers going Sunday. They do. It's close, but with Cashman in there, I'd probably give the edge to the Vikings. Overall, the front seven, I'm going to give to the Vikings. But when you factor in Harrison Phillips might not play, right? I heard
We'll
that
see.
today.
I think he will.
I'm guessing he's going to be out there.
That would be a huge loss. But yeah, without Aiden Hutchinson, the pendulum swings to the Viking side on the front seven. With him, I think the Lions would have the front seven.
All right, Chris, talk about the secondary.
I mean, we say this every week about the Vikings. The secondary has improved more rapidly than I think anybody expected it to. Josh Metellus is everywhere all the time. It seems like he's a guy that's a key player every week. The corners have been outstanding, whether we're talking about Gilmore, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy. I mean, Byron Murphy's had a couple issues this year, but Griffin and Gilmore have been outstanding. Can't count out Harrison Smith, who's still solid back there. Cam Bynum is still good. The Lions have some talent in the secondary. I mean, they have Branch and Dirty Joseph and some other folks, but their corners are pretty young, and I think that Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison are going to be taking advantage of those corners for most of the day. So I'm going to lean towards the Vikings with my check mark in this category.
Drew?
I got the Vikings. I got the Vikings secondary in this. When you look right down the line at all these players, the Vikings seem to be gelling in the secondary. Everybody seems to know their position and their role now, which is really cool. And they don't have a Metellus. They don't have anybody like that over there in Detroit. And this is where my tasty tidbit comes in. Tasty tidbit! Guess who the most penalized defensive player is in the entire National Football League?
Well,
Kirby Joseph.
Terrion Arnold.
Is he really?
Yeah, the most penalized guy on offense and defense is Laramie Tunsil, and I think it's because he got 16 false starts against the Vikings.
Yeah.
No, Terrion Arnold, 8 penalties total on him, 5 pass interference, 2 defensive holding, and a face mask. That guy is a penalty machine. That's going to cause problems. And let me add to the tasty tidbit by saying the Lions have given up 20 first downs by penalty this year. Vikings have given up 9.
That is incredibly undisciplined football. Damn.
They play undisciplined football at times. You're right, Chris. And they have 20. The Vikings have only given up 9 by penalty. Arnold is a penalty flag machine. Branch is good. Brian Branch is the best player back there. You got to treat him like you treat Xavier McKinney. You got to know where he's at all the time because he can do everything. He can do it all, but Dirty Joseph, not going to have a good game. They got Amik Robertson, But Terrion Arnold, this is why I picked Addison as my X factor, guys, because I looked at their secondary. Jefferson's going to be going crazy on him. Who are you going to put on Addison? They can't cover him. They can't cover him and Jefferson. And Vikings get my secondary pick, man. Arnold is a penalty machine. I bet you he gets 2 pass interferences this week, Ted.
Here's what I would do. Talk about thinking outside the box. If I'm Kevin O'Connell, I get on the phone and I call Jerome Simpson.
For what, weed?
JS, what you doing? I sign him to a 1-week contract, and I say, you find Terrion Arnold on the field, and I'll have Sammy Darts throw it deep, and we'll get a pass interference penalty thrown on him on every single play, and our offense will be Jerome's out there somewhere, and we'll get a 52-yard pass interference called on Terrion Arnold every single drive, and we'll win 52-0.
Dude,
don't tell me I don't know football, boys. No, seriously.
Jerome Simpson. He's probably hanging around that trash can that's on fire that you see at the kid from New
That was
York.
like the Vikings offense that one year with Simpson. Every game he got like a 50-yard pass interference, or like 2005, whatever it was.
I guess
Anyways,
Travis
all right.
Taylor was busy.
Yeah, I like the Vikings secondary here too. You put in Carlton Davis's injury, Brian Branch was limited with a knee. Those are things to monitor for the Lions in terms of injuries as the week progresses. Chris, Drew, I can't remember who mentioned it. Josh Metellus, how he just plays so many different roles and positions for the Vikings on defense. I love the Vikings secondary. They match up against Detroit's receivers much better than Detroit's secondary matches up against Minnesota's receivers, even if TJ Hawkinson doesn't play. St. Brown and Jameson Williams are probably still going to get theirs to some extent, but I think, Drew, you're right. Jordan Addison probably going to have a huge game on Sunday, but that's just me. All right, red zone, Drew.
You know, this was going to be my other push category. When it comes down to being equivalent on the red zone, I always go with who's the better defensive team in the red zone, and I had to pick the Lions for this one because they are ranked 10th on defense. The Vikings are a better offensive red zone team, but if they don't have Aaron Jones, that hurts them a lot in the red zone. This could just as well be a push, but I gave the check mark to Detroit on the red zone.
I'm going with the Vikings because they're at home. Lions are better defensively, but I think the Vikings have an advantage at home, and their lower defensive ranking, but being at home gives them, I think, a little bit of an advantage there. So I'm going to go with the Vikings. Chris?
I'm going to give the very slightest of edges to Detroit here. Drew touched on the Aaron Jones injury, and when you get into the red zone, the ability to run the ball is going to be pretty important. You know, David Montgomery has shown he's got a nose for the end zone when the Lions get down that close. Gibbs can take it in as well. So, yeah, it's a very slight advantage, but I'm going to have to lean Detroit on this one.
All right, special teams. This is not a tasty tidbit, but both Jack Bates, the Detroit kicker, and Will Reichard are both 9 for 9 on field goals this year. Neither one of them missed a field goal.
Wow. That is kind of a tasty tidbit, though.
Jack Bates has missed one extra point. Will Reichard has not missed any. The big difference here is Will Reichard has gone 3 for 3 on field goals over 50 yards. Jack Bates has not attempted a field goal over 50 yards. Punters are both pretty close to their average. Kick and punt returns, I think, are kind of a wash. This dynamic kickoff has become anything but, I think, so far. That's kind of a push. So I'm going to give a very slight special teams advantage to Minnesota on this one. Chris?
As long as we keep Jalen Naylor the hell away from the punt return team, I think the advantage for this one goes to Minnesota. You mentioned Will Reichard. Reichard has shown he has the leg to kick it from basically anywhere from the 50-yard line inwards. He's hit from 50, 58, 54, whatever the numbers are for his 50-yard field goals. And like you said, the punting's pretty close. The return units are relatively close. So I think if it came down to if I needed one kick, I would take Reichard over Bates. So that is why I will give my special teams check mark to Minnesota.
You know, I'm giving my special teams check mark to Minnesota. It's really a tough call for me because you guys both talked about the kicker. I was doing some research this week. Do you guys realize that the Vikings are the worst punt return team in the league? The worst.
And that doesn't surprise me.
And that is concerning to me. Now they're 5-0. They've won regardless of that, but they are getting nothing from the punt return team. And it's not necessarily the punt returner's fault, Ted. He doesn't have any time to do anything. There's two guys up his ass every time he catches it. We talked about this on the live show. They got to change their personnel, but I don't want to be last in anything. So I'm giving the Vikings the edge here, but it's kind of a cautious edge on the special team.
Okay. Chris, coaching.
Again, I say this every week. If there's a better head coach assistant coach combo in the NFL than Kevin O'Connell and Brian Flores, we might see one this week with Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson. But I think Flores versus Ben Johnson is a push, and I don't care if it comes off as a little bit biased. I think Kevin O'Connell is a better football coach than Dan Campbell is. O'Connell, nothing was expected from this team this year. He has them at 5-0. If you listen to the dude's post-game speeches every week, dudes want to run through a wall for this guy. And I'm sure the Lions players feel the same about Dan Campbell as well. But yeah, I think, again, it's another one that's a very slight advantage, but I am going with Kevin O'Connell until he gets out coached by somebody, because I damn sure haven't seen that happen yet.
Drew?
Vikings. Kevin O'Connell, Brian Flores. You know what the weakest part of the Detroit Lions team is? Dan Campbell. Dan Campbell has lost the most games for Detroit himself than the team has. They're fourth in rushing, fourth in passing, third against the run. They got great talent out there. His decision making is the weakest part of their team. His idiot moves that he does every week, and I'll go over it in my summary when we do the summary. I got one more idiot move that cost him already this season. If they weren't winning, he'd be fired. We watch him in Viking games thinking, why is he going for it at his own 15-yard line in the third quarter? Kevin O'Connell is a much better head coach. Chris is right. Vikings get my check mark. Vikings are at home. Vikings have the offense and the defense coach-wise of the season right now and of the NFL.
We've talked about Dan Campbell before. I think Dan Campbell has a lot of similarities to Mike Tyson's career if Mike Tyson had been able to continue coaching. I like Tice. I love Tice as a coach. I kind of thought he got a raw deal at the end of the Red McCombs era. He wasn't given the resources I feel he needed to assemble a full staff, et cetera, et cetera. Campbell has gotten that. Campbell has grown as a coach, but I agree with you, Drew. He makes really weird, questionable decisions almost every game. I believe he cost the Detroit Lions a spot in the Super Bowl last year with decisions at the end of that NFC Championship game against the 49ers. And at some point, you rattle off all those statistics where Detroit is better than just about everybody in the NFL in team categories: running, stopping the run, throwing the football. At some point, as much as they like playing for Campbell, they're going to go, man, what are you doing? That shtick is going to grow old, and it's going to cost them one game too many. I got a summary about Brian Flores here when we get to the intangibles, but I like this coaching staff and what they're doing. I'm going to pick the Vikings. No disrespect to Detroit. I think they have a very fine coaching staff. I like the Vikings a little bit better because they got the players they needed to run their offense and their defense. So, Vikings.